Have you ever felt like you're in a season of waiting, a time when nothing seems to be happening, and yet deep within you sense that God is preparing you for something greater? You might feel like you're stuck in a moment of silence, waiting for a breakthrough that never seems to come. But what if I told you that this silence, this quiet season you're experiencing is exactly where God is doing some of His most powerful work in your life? What if in the very stillness God is working behind the scenes to prepare you for something far beyond your wildest dreams? We often associate silence with inactivity, with God's absence or disinterest in our lives. We wonder, oh, why am I waiting so long? Why does it feel like nothing is moving? Why is everything so quiet? But in those moments when everything seems still, God is speaking. He's moving, and He's preparing you for what you're about to step into. Think about it. Many of the most transformative moments in the Bible took place during times of silence and waiting. Consider the story of Joseph. Joseph was sold into slavery by his brothers, thrown into prison and forgotten by those he helped. Can you imagine how lonely and silent those years must have felt? But in that silence, God was refining Joseph. He was preparing him for a position of leadership that would not only save his family, but an entire nation. God was shaping Joseph's heart, strengthening his character, and teaching him to trust God's timing. God wasn't absent during that time. He was working deeply, preparing Joseph for something much bigger than he could have imagined. Just like Joseph, you may not understand why you're in the silence right now, but God is with you in it. He's using this time to mold you, to shape your heart, and to deepen your faith in Him. The silence is not a sign that God has forgotten you. It's actually a sign that He's preparing you for the very thing you've been praying for. In the quiet, God is working in ways that you can't see. Just as the seed must first be buried in the dark soil before it can break through the surface and grow, so too must you be prepared in the silence for the breakthrough that's coming. You might feel like you're stuck in an endless season of waiting. But trust me, God is working on your behalf. Don't give up in the silence. Keep your heart open. Keep praying and keep trusting, because the breakthrough is closer than you think. Your season of silence is a season of preparation, and you are being prepared for a destiny beyond your imagination. When you're going through a season of silence, it's easy to think that God has forgotten about you. After all, you've been praying, you've been waiting, but still, nothing seems to happen. It feels like the more you ask, the quieter things get. You may begin to question whether God is even listening to you. But I want to remind you of something incredibly important. Silence doesn't mean absence, and waiting doesn't mean rejection. God's timing is far greater than our understanding, and His ways are higher than our ways. In the Bible, we see countless examples of people who are called by God and found themselves waiting in silence for a period of time before stepping into their destiny. Think about Abraham. God promised Abraham that he would be the father of many nations, but for years, there was no sign of that promise being fulfilled. Instead, Abraham and his wife Sarah had to wait. They were growing older, and the promises seemed to be fading away. But in the silence, God was testing Abraham's faith. He was preparing him for a promise that was so much bigger than what he had initially imagined. When God finally fulfilled His promise, it wasn't just a moment of joy for Abraham, it was the beginning of a legacy that would shape the entire world. God used that time of waiting to strengthen Abraham's faith, to refine his trust in God, and to prepare him for the incredible journey ahead. The same is true for you. Right now, in the midst of your waiting, God is refining your character, strengthening your trust, and preparing you for the future He has for you. You might feel like you're stuck, like nothing is happening, but the truth is, God is doing something in you that you might not see on the surface. It's in those quiet moments that God shapes us. He molds our hearts, teaches us patience, and draws us closer to Him. When God is silent, He is not distant. He is preparing you for what is to come. Have you ever noticed that some of the greatest blessings in life come after seasons of waiting? Think about a pregnant mother. During the months of pregnancy, she carries the promise of new life inside her. There's a lot of waiting involved, but as the time passes, she prepares herself for the day of delivery. And when that baby is born, it's the beginning of something beautiful. That same principle applies to your life. God is carrying something beautiful inside of you during this time of silence. He is preparing you to birth a blessing, a promise, a breakthrough. The waiting is not wasted. It's part of the process. The truth is, we live in a world that wants everything now. We want answers, results, and solutions immediately. But God's ways are different. He often uses waiting to teach us patience, to grow our faith, and to align our hearts with His will. Sometimes we can't handle the blessings and breakthroughs we're asking for until we've gone through a season of preparation. Waiting allows us to build endurance, to learn to trust when we don't see results, and to develop a heart that can handle the weight of God's blessings when they finally come. In the silence, God is preparing you for something far greater than you can imagine. He is working on your behalf, even when it doesn't seem like it. It's easy to look at other people's lives and think they have everything figured out. But what we often forget is that behind the scenes there are seasons of silence and waiting that shape people into who they are meant to be. And just like them, you are in the process of being prepared for something incredible. Don't lose hope in the silence. Trust that God is using this time to grow you, to shape you, and to get you ready for the purpose He has for your life. Even when you can't see it, even when it feels like nothing is happening, know that God is at work. Keep praying, keep trusting, and keep believing because your moment is coming. You may not know when, you may not know how, but God's timing is perfect, and He will bring you through this season of silence into a season of breakthrough. As you continue on this journey, remember that every season has a purpose. The silence is part of the preparation. And when God speaks, when He opens that door, you'll be ready to walk into the fullness of the promise He's been preparing for you. So hold on, God is not done with you yet. Have you ever wondered why God seems to remain silent during certain seasons of your life? It's as if you're praying earnestly, seeking His guidance, yet the silence echoes back at you. And in that silence, it can feel like God is distant, disconnected, or even unconcerned with what you're going through. But let me assure you, this silence is not a sign of God's absence. In fact, it's often a sign that He's doing something deep within you. There's a passage in the Bible that speaks to this truth, found in the book of 1 Kings 19. Elijah, one of God's greatest prophets, had just experienced an incredible victory over the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel. He had seen God's mighty power, and yet shortly after this incredible victory, Elijah found himself running for his life, feeling overwhelmed, discouraged, and alone. He ran into the wilderness, wanting to give up. And in his deepest moment of despair, he cried out to God. He was looking for an answer, for a sign, something, anything to reassure him that God was still with him. But instead of a thunderstorm or an earthquake, God came to him in a gentle whisper. In that moment, God wasn't speaking in the loud, dramatic ways that Elijah had expected. Instead, He was in the quiet stillness, teaching Elijah that sometimes God's presence and answers come not in the noise, but in the silence. When we're in a season of waiting and it feels like God isn't speaking, remember that He might just be speaking to us in ways we aren't looking for. Through quiet whispers, through nudges in our hearts, through moments of stillness where He's asking us to listen more closely. This principle applies to your life too. In the times when you're feeling the silence, when you're wondering where God is, take a moment to listen for the quiet whispers. Don't assume that God has abandoned you or is uninterested in your struggles. He is always with you, and He may be waiting for you to pause, to stop searching for a loud sign, and to listen carefully for His still, small voice. There's so much that happens in the silence that we can't immediately see or understand. But over time, as we learn to be still, we realize that God is doing more than we ever imagined. We often think that God must move in dramatic, obvious ways. We expect a miraculous sign that will make everything clear to us in an instant. But God's ways are not always like that. Often He uses the stillness to teach us patience, to build our faith, and to refine our hearts. It's in those moments when it seems like nothing is happening that God is often doing His most important work within us. He's teaching us to trust Him even when we don't understand, to rely on His timing, and to lean into the quiet moments where His presence is still, but oh, so real. As you look back on your life, think about the times when you felt the most distant from God. Maybe you were going through a difficult season, and it felt like He wasn't listening. But as time passed, you began to see that God was using that time to mold you, shape you, and prepare you for something greater. The silence wasn't an indication that God had forgotten about you. It was part of the process of preparing you for what was to come. The same is true for you today. If you're in a season of silence, don't despair. God is not ignoring you. He is working in ways you cannot see right now. But if you trust Him and keep your heart open, you will begin to understand that His silence is simply part of His greater plan for your life. And just like with Elijah, it's often in the stillness that God reveals His greatest truths. When everything else around us is noisy, chaotic, and overwhelming, God asks us to step into the silence and listen. In that quiet space, He is whispering words of comfort, direction, and encouragement. He's teaching us to trust Him even when we don't have all the answers, and He's preparing us for the next season of our lives. This is why the Bible tells us in Psalm 46:10, "Be still and know that I am God." In the stillness, in the silence, we come to know God in a deeper way. We come to understand His heart and His plans for us. So if you find yourself in a season of waiting, of quiet, take heart. God is not far from you. He is closer than you think. And in the silence, He is preparing you for the breakthrough you've been praying for. Remember, silence is not a rejection. Hakif. It is preparation. God is shaping your character, deepening your faith, and drawing you closer to Him. Stay in the silence with Him. Wait patiently, listen attentively, and trust that He is doing something powerful in your life. The breakthrough you've been waiting for may be closer than you realize. We often overlook the value of silence in our spiritual lives, but it's in these quiet moments that God does His most profound work. When we're in a rush seeking answers, solutions, and breakthroughs, it's hard to appreciate the power of stillness. We live in a world that is constantly moving, full of distractions and noise. And yet in the midst of all the chaos, God calls us to be still, to pause, and to listen. It's in these moments of silence that we can truly encounter His presence. Think about it for a moment. Some of the most significant events in the Bible took place during moments of silence or waiting. Take, for example, the Israelites as they wandered in the desert for 40 years. For decades, they didn't see the immediate fulfillment of God's promises. They wandered in the wilderness, waiting for the day when they would enter the promised land. And during that time, they were being prepared. God used that silence, that waiting, to shape their hearts, to refine their faith, and to teach them to trust in His timing. The silence wasn't a sign of abandonment. It was God's way of preparing them for the incredible blessing that awaited them. In the same way, God uses the waiting periods in our lives to prepare us for what's next. But it's not always easy to see the purpose behind the silence while we're in the midst of it. When we're in a season of waiting, we can easily become frustrated, anxious, and impatient. We want answers now. And we want the breakthrough today. But God's ways are not our ways, and His timing is perfect. We may not understand why we have to wait, but the truth is that God is preparing us in the silence for something greater than we could ever imagine. In these moments of quiet, God is working behind the scenes. He is refining our character, strengthening our faith, and deepening our relationship with Him. He is teaching us to trust Him in ways we could never learn in the noise and busyness of life. It's easy to rely on our own strength when everything is going well, but it's in the silence, when we have nothing but God to depend on, that we truly learn what it means to trust Him completely. There's an important lesson to be learned in the waiting. It's not about the destination, but about the journey. God isn't just interested in where He's taking us. He's interested in who we become along the way. It's in the silence that we are shaped and molded into the people God created us to be. It's in the waiting that we learn to let go of our own plans and agendas and fully surrender to His will. The silence teaches us humility, patience, and obedience. But it's not just about what God is doing in us during the silence. The waiting period also prepares us for the moment when He will reveal His plan. Just as a seed needs time to grow underground before it can break through the soil, there are things God is doing in us that we can't see yet. We may not understand why we're in a season of silence, but we can trust that God is working in ways we cannot yet comprehend. When you feel like God is silent, remind yourself that His silence does not mean He is absent. He is preparing you for something greater. Just as He prepared Moses in the desert, the disciples in the wilderness, and Elijah on the mountaintop, He is preparing you right now. You may not see it yet, But God is using this time to equip you for your destiny. And here's the incredible thing. God's silence is not permanent. There will come a day when the waiting is over, when the silence will break and God will reveal the next step in your journey. But until that moment comes, He is asking you to trust Him, to remain faithful, and to stay present in the quiet. The breakthrough you've been praying for may be closer than you think, but God is using this time to strengthen you, to prepare you, and to refine you. When the silence feels overwhelming, remember that God's presence is still with you. He is not distant or absent. He is working in you, shaping you, and preparing you for the next season of your life. So don't rush through the silence. Embrace it, learn from it, and trust that God is doing something powerful in you that will ultimately lead to a greater breakthrough. When you look back on this season, you'll see that the silence wasn't a time of abandonment. It was a time of preparation. God was setting the stage for your future, and you were being equipped for the incredible things He has in store for you. The silence is not wasted time. It is time that God is using to prepare you for something far greater than you could ever imagine. So as you navigate this season of waiting, remember that God is at work. Trust His timing, embrace the silence, and know that He is preparing you for something extraordinary. The best is yet to come. As you reflect on the moments in your life when God's presence felt distant, remember that even in those moments, God was not absent. It's easy to think that silence equals abandonment, but the truth is far from that. There are times when God in His infinite wisdom allows silence to reign, not to push us away, but to draw us closer to Him. It is often in the quiet that we hear God's voice most clearly. It's in those moments when we are alone with our thoughts, stripped of the noise and distractions of life, that we are finally able to hear the still, small whisper of God's voice guiding us. Consider the story of Elijah, who, after a powerful encounter with God on Mount Carmel, found himself in a moment of despair and fear. In that time of crisis, God did not speak to Elijah through the great wind, the earthquake, or the fire. Instead, God spoke to him in a gentle whisper. Sometimes God's message comes not through loud dramatic events, but in the quiet whispers of our hearts. This is how God often works during the silent times in our lives. He isn't absent or uninterested in our struggles. He is simply preparing us to hear Him in a deeper way. The quiet times are not a sign of rejection, but a call to listen more closely, to tune our hearts to His voice. This is a powerful and intimate experience. When God seems silent, it's an invitation to press in even closer. He's not withholding His presence from us, but rather, He's using the silence to cultivate a deeper intimacy with us. Much like a relationship between two people, the deepest moments of connection are often not found in the loud, boisterous times, but in the quiet, personal moments where words are few but understanding is deep. God wants to have that kind of connection with you. He wants you to know Him not just in the exciting times of life, but in the stillness, where His presence is felt in a way that is unshakable. There is a beauty that comes with silence. In the silence, God begins to reveal things to us that we cannot see in the noise. It is in the stillness that we often find our deepest insights, our clearest understanding of His will for our lives. God isn't wasting your waiting. The silence is not a void. It is a space where God's perfect will is being slowly revealed. Each moment of silence is part of His grand design, crafting us into the people we are meant to be. But it's important to understand that silence is not the end of the story. God doesn't leave us in silence forever. There is always a purpose for the waiting, a reason for the quiet seasons. Think about the butterfly in its cocoon. For a period of time, it is hidden away, still and quiet, undergoing a transformation that is not visible to the outside world. If we were to try and speed up the process, we would risk interrupting its growth. In the same way, when we are in seasons of silence, God is working behind the scenes, transforming us, preparing us for the breakthrough that is coming. This is also a time for spiritual growth. It's easy to rely on our own strength when we're busy, when life is full of distractions. But when God calls us into silence, He is calling us into a deeper level of dependence on Him. The waiting period is not a time of weakness, but a time of preparation. He was using the silence to prepare David's heart to build his leadership skills and to teach him dependence on God. It was in the silence that David learned to trust God with his life, to rely on His protection, and to develop a heart after God's own heart. In the same way, God is preparing you right now. He may not be speaking loudly. He may not be giving you immediate answers, but He is still working. The silence is not a sign that God has forgotten you. It's an indication that He is setting the stage for something greater. God doesn't waste time, and He doesn't waste silence. In these quiet seasons, He is preparing you for something that is bigger, deeper, and more fulfilling than anything you could have imagined. Just as a seed must remain in the soil, hidden and unseen, for it to grow and eventually bear fruit, so too must you remain in God's presence, trusting that His silence will give way to a beautiful harvest. There's another important truth to remember during these silent seasons. Silence often teaches us to rely not on our own strength, but on God's power. It forces us to surrender our desire for control, to let go of our own timelines, and to trust that God knows what He is doing. This surrender is a vital part of our spiritual journey. When we face silence, we are forced to wrestle with our doubts and fears, and in doing so, we learn to trust God more deeply. We learn to rely on His promises rather than our own understanding. This is a gift, even if it doesn't feel like one in the moment. We also need to remember that God's silence does not mean He is indifferent to our pain. He sees your struggles, your fears, your heartache. He knows what you are going through, and He has not forgotten you. Just because He is silent doesn't mean He is absent. In fact, some of the most intimate moments with God are born in the silence. It is in those times when we are stripped of all our distractions, all the noise of the world, that we are able to hear His voice clearly. God is speaking in the silence, but we must learn to listen with patience and trust that His timing is perfect. If you are in a season of silence right now, I want to encourage you to not be discouraged. The silence may feel like a void, but it's actually a time of growth. It's a time when God is refining your character, preparing your heart, and shaping your future. Trust that He is at work, even when you can't see it. And remember that His plans for you are always good. When the time is right, God will make His presence known in ways that will amaze you. Until then, let the silence be a place where you grow closer to Him, where you trust Him more deeply, and where you find peace in knowing that He is always working on your behalf. God is preparing you in ways you can't even imagine. The silence is a season of preparation, a time when He is doing something deep inside of you. Don't rush it, don't fight it, and don't doubt it. Embrace it, knowing that God's silence is not the absence of His love, but the presence of His preparation. You are being shaped for greatness, and in the fullness of time, you will see the beautiful fruit of this season of silence. In times of silence, God is often doing His most significant work. It may feel as if He's distant or uninvolved, but that's when He's preparing us in ways we don't always recognize at the moment. Think about the way a farmer prepares the soil before planting. The land is plowed. Rocks are removed, and the earth is turned over and left to rest. This is not a visible process, but it's essential for the growth that will follow. Similarly, God's work in our lives, especially in periods of waiting and silence, is foundational. He's preparing your heart, your spirit, and your circumstances for the breakthrough that's coming. Even though you can't see it just yet, there's a powerful moment in the story of Abraham and Sarah that reveals how God prepares us in ways we might never expect. Abraham was given a promise by God. He would become the father of many nations. But as time passed, the promise seemed delayed. Sarah, his wife, was barren, and they were growing old. They tried to take matters into their own hands, but God was teaching them patience and trust. It wasn't until Abraham was 100 years old and Sarah was 90 that they saw God's promise fulfilled when Sarah miraculously gave birth to Isaac. This delay wasn't because God had forgotten them. It was because He was preparing them for something bigger than they could have imagined. The wait was part of the preparation, part of the refining process. This is a truth we often miss in the middle of our own delays. We see the waiting as a burden, as an inconvenience, or even as a sign of abandonment. But the silence and waiting are essential parts of God's preparation. It's in the stillness that we're often taught to trust, to wait, to learn that God's timing is always perfect. He is teaching us that His ways are better than ours, and that the outcome He has for us will always be worth the wait. During these seasons of silence, it's crucial to remember that God sees the whole picture, while we only see a small part. We are confined by our own limited understanding of time and circumstances. But God is outside of time. He sees the beginning, the middle, and the end of our lives all at once. He knows the exact moment when everything will come together. And He is making sure that we are fully prepared for the blessings He has promised. God isn't just giving us what we want. He's giving us what we need. And that requires preparation. Think of a master sculptor who spends hours chiseling away at a block of marble. The work is slow and sometimes invisible to the observer, but the sculptor knows what's being created. He sees the final masterpiece, even if it's not yet evident to anyone else. The same is true of God in our lives. In the silence, He is chiseling away at our hearts, molding us into something greater. It may feel like we're not moving forward, but God is making sure we're ready to step into the next phase of His plan for our lives. One of the most important things we can do during these silent seasons is to surrender our timelines to God. We must remember that His timing is not the same as ours. When we are caught up in the hustle and bustle of life, we want everything to happen on our own schedule. We want answers immediately, and we grow frustrated when things don't unfold according to our plans. But God's timing is always perfect. He knows exactly when to release the breakthrough, and it is usually when we are most prepared to receive it. Trusting in God's timing requires a level of patience and faith that can only be developed in the quiet moments of waiting. There is something incredibly powerful about trusting God when we can't see the outcome. When we have to rely on Him in the silence, we begin to experience a deeper level of faith. Faith that doesn't depend on what we see or understand. Faith that trusts in God's goodness even when we don't see the answers. Faith that believes He is working behind the scenes even when we don't feel Him. This kind of faith doesn't come naturally to us. It's developed through time spent in God's presence, through seasons of silence, and through learning to trust His plans. Another aspect of God's preparation is that He is working not only in our lives, but also in the lives of those around us. Just like Joseph's rise to power in Egypt didn't just involve his own preparation, but also the preparation of his brothers, the people around him, and even the entire nation, our seasons of silence and waiting are often part of God's bigger plan that involves others. Sometimes God is working on the hearts of those we don't even realize, preparing the way for our breakthrough. It's important to remember that God's plan for us is never just about us. It's about how we fit into His larger story, a story that includes others and His kingdom purpose. As you wait in the silence, take comfort in the fact that God is preparing you for something magnificent. Every moment of waiting is not wasted. It is part of the process that will lead you to the promise He has for you. And when the time is right, when you are fully prepared, God will open the door, and you will walk into the fulfillment of His purpose for your life. That's the beauty of the silence. It's not an empty void, it's a place of preparation. God is working in ways you can't see. But when the time comes, you will understand that every moment of waiting was necessary to get you to where you are meant to be. In the stillness, God also gives us the opportunity to examine our own hearts. While the world is moving at its fast pace, we can be tempted to follow along, to rush ahead and take matters into our own hands. But in the quiet moments, we are invited to slow down, to listen, and to reflect on our own motives, desires, and needs. It's in this space of reflection that God begins to do some of His most profound work in us. We often think of God's preparation as something external, something that affects our circumstances, but the truth is that the most important work He does often happens within our hearts. In silence, He reveals areas in our lives that need healing, transformation, and alignment with His will. One of the most powerful examples of God using silence for personal transformation is found in the story of David. David, the young shepherd boy, was anointed as king long before he actually sat on the throne. During the years that followed his anointing, David faced countless challenges, including fleeing for his life from King Saul. It must have seemed to David that his calling was delayed, that God had forgotten the promise He had made. But in those years of silence, God was preparing David's heart. He was refining his character, teaching him humility, patience, and trust. David learned to rely on God alone, and through those silent years, he became the kind of leader that Israel needed. If David rushed into kingship immediately without the years of preparation, he might not have had the strength of character to lead the people. God's silence in David's life was not a punishment. It was a time of transformation. This is often the case for us too. We want to rush into the promises of God, to step into our destiny. But the process of becoming who God wants us to be is never instant. He takes the time to work on us, to refine us, and to equip us with the spiritual maturity needed to fulfill our calling. The silence allows us to grow deeper in our relationship with God. It's in the quiet moments when we can hear His voice more clearly, when we are no longer distracted by the noise of the world. God is teaching us, molding us, and preparing us to step into the destiny He has for us. Sometimes the silence feels like a test. It feels as though God is distant, as if He's left us to fend for ourselves. But this is not the case. God's silence is often a time when He's teaching us how to stand firm in our faith, how to trust in Him when we can't see what's ahead. It's a season that strengthens our dependence on Him, helping us to let go of self-reliance and trust that His plans are always better than ours. When we find ourselves in a place of waiting, it's an opportunity to shift our perspective. Instead of seeing silence as a sign of God's absence, we can choose to see it as His invitation to go deeper in our relationship with Him, to lean into His presence, and to trust that He is doing something powerful within us. It's also important to note that during the silence, God is preparing us for something much bigger than we may realize. We often focus on the immediate promise or breakthrough that we are waiting for, but God's vision for our lives extends far beyond our current circumstances. His preparation during the silent seasons isn't just for what's ahead in the short term. It's for the bigger picture, the long-term purpose He has for us. The things that God is doing in our lives now will equip us for the roles He will call us to in the future. The waiting period, although challenging, is crucial because it prepares us to handle what lies ahead with wisdom and maturity. As you wait in silence, consider that God might be preparing you for something far greater than you can currently comprehend. He is at work behind the scenes, orchestrating the events of your life, aligning the right people and positioning you in places that will fulfill His purpose for you. While you may feel like you're stuck in a holding pattern, God is always moving you forward. The silence is part of His process, and it's essential for what's to come. There is also beauty in the fact that silence doesn't mean inactivity. While we might not see the immediate results, God is working in our hearts, minds, and spirits. He is teaching us perseverance, developing patience, and strengthening our faith. Through the stillness, He's cultivating a deeper trust in His timing and His ability to bring His plans to fruition. Just because we don't see results doesn't mean that God isn't working. His work often happens beneath the surface in ways that aren't immediately visible. But that doesn't mean the work is any less real or important. In the silence, there is an invitation to grow. The journey may seem long and the process may feel slow, but every moment is a gift from God, shaping us, preparing us, and molding us for the next season. Don't let the silence fool you into thinking God has forgotten you. He's very much at work. And when the time is right, you will see how the quiet seasons were some of the most powerful moments of your life. Trust that God is preparing you for something far greater than you can imagine. And when the time comes, you will be more than ready to walk into your destiny. When we are in the midst of God's silence, it can feel as though we are all alone. The distractions of the world seem to fade, and we are left with our thoughts, our doubts, and sometimes even a sense of abandonment. But this is precisely where God does some of His deepest work, when we feel most alone. In those moments when we have no choice but to rely on Him, He is building something that will carry us into the future with confidence. The silence becomes a sanctuary for our souls. It's a place where we can lean into His promises, reflect on His faithfulness, and trust that He is preparing us for something greater than we can even imagine. You see, God isn't just preparing the circumstances around us. He's preparing us to handle what is coming. Yes, sir. Just as a soldier goes through rigorous training before being sent into battle, God uses silence to prepare our hearts, minds, and spirits for the challenges ahead. The waiting period isn't wasted time. It's a time of training, of deepening our relationship with God, and of strengthening our spiritual muscles so that we can stand firm when life's trials come. This is where many of us often miss the mark. We think that the silence is simply a delay, an obstacle that we must endure until the next season arrives. But in reality, it's a season of preparation, a time when God is equipping us for what's to come. It's in the silence that God teaches us patience, endurance, and trust. It's in the quiet moments that we learn to wait on Him, to trust that His timing is always perfect, even when we can't see the full picture. This is where our faith is tested. Not in the moments when everything is going our way, but in the moments when everything seems still. It's in these times that we must choose to believe that God is at work behind the scenes. Though we may not see immediate results, we can rest assured that He is preparing us for something greater. His silence is not a sign of abandonment. It is a sign of His loving preparation. In the silence, God also teaches us to surrender. It's easy to try and control our circumstances when we feel like we're in charge. But when God goes quiet, we're forced to release our grip on the outcomes, trusting that He knows what's best for us. Surrendering to God's will during the silent seasons allows us to align our hearts with His. It's in the quiet moments that we learn the power of trusting God with the unknown, letting go of our plans and desires and saying, "Your will be done." In this act of surrender, we find peace. We release the pressure to have everything figured out, and we simply trust that God is leading us, even when we can't see the path ahead. While the silence may feel like an uncomfortable waiting room, it's important to remember that God is never wasting time. He is using the silence to teach us essential lessons that will strengthen us for the future. God's silence is not a sign that He has forgotten us. It is His way of drawing us closer to Him, allowing us to lean into Him in a deeper, more meaningful way. When we find ourselves in these quiet seasons, we must resist the urge to fill the void with distractions, fears, or doubts. Instead, we should embrace the stillness, knowing that in this sacred space, God is preparing us to step into the fullness of His plans for our lives. It's also important to remember that while we may feel disconnected from the world, God's silence is never a sign of His absence. He is always with us, even in the moments when we feel alone. Just as a parent watches over their child, even when they're not actively engaging with them, so God is watching over us during the silent seasons. He sees our struggles, He hears our prayers, and He is faithfully working behind the scenes. Though we may not always sense His presence in the way we expect, His love and care for us never wavers. The silence doesn't mean He's distant. It simply means He's preparing us for something extraordinary. We can also take comfort in knowing that God's silence isn't permanent. There will come a time when His voice will break through the stillness, when the waiting will be over, and when we will see the fruit of the preparation. But even when that moment comes, we will realize that the waiting season was never wasted. The lessons we learned in the silence, the trust we developed in God's timing, and the strength we gained through surrender will carry us into the next season with greater clarity, faith, and wisdom. As we wait in the silence, we can rest assured that God is with us, preparing us, shaping us, and positioning us for the life He has planned. Even in the stillness, He is at work. So when you find yourself in a season of waiting, don't rush through it. Don't try to fill the silence with noise or distraction. Instead, lean into it. Embrace the quiet moments as an opportunity to grow deeper in your faith and trust in God. His silence is a powerful tool that He uses to shape you. And when the time is right, you will step into the next chapter of your life, fully equipped and ready to walk in His purpose for you. As we conclude, let us reflect on what we've learned today about God's preparation in the silence. It's so easy to get frustrated or discouraged when it feels like nothing is happening. But we must remember that God's timeline is not our timeline. Just because we cannot see the movement doesn't mean He's not at work. In fact, some of the most powerful moments of transformation happen in the quiet, unseen spaces of our lives. God is always working, even when it appears that nothing is happening. In the silence, God is strengthening your faith, refining your character, and preparing you for a breakthrough.